she'd threatened to. Lizzie shook her head. No, you know what mothers are like with their sons. Emily smiled wryly. Her younger brother Josh had always been their mother's favourite, though Emily had never been jealous of him and loved him dearly. He'd been the reason the family had come to Sheffield towards the end of 1920. Martha Ryan's ambitions for her son had known no bounds, and she'd believed that the small cottage industry of candle-making, which had been in the Ryan family for at least 4 generations, was not good enough for Josh. The young man himself would have been content to stay in Ashford in the Water, marry his sweetheart Amy, and continue with the family tradition. But Martha had squashed all his hopes and dreams. Underage at 18, he'd not been able to marry without his parents' permission, and Martha was the only one who could give that consent. Josh and Emily's father, Walter, had returned from the carnage of the Great War a broken man. He could no longer work, nor, for a time, even speak. His days were spent sitting beside the kitchen range, plagued by fits of shaking caused by shell shock and exposure to gas attacks. Now, as they waited for Lizzie to explain further, Emily was remembering the time they'd arrived in the court off Garden Street, the kindness of Lizzie and her mother Bess, and, she had to admit, in the early days, even Mick had been good to them too. But it had been Lizzie's infatuation with Josh that had brought about an element of bitterness between the two families, and when Josh, finding that Amy had borne his child, had returned to Ashford, things had got really nasty between the two families. Emily's memories were interrupted as Nell sniffed, marched towards her machine, and snatched at the pile of newspaper with swift, angry movements. "If he comes anywhere near me," she glanced swiftly at Emily, "us, then that's where he'll end up this time, I promise you. And as for Steve, well, when he hears that Mick's dared to show his face here again, I dread to think what might happen." Galvanised by Nell's remark, Lizzie hurried to her and grasped her arm, looking up into the other girl's face with pleading eyes. "Please, Nell, don't tell Steve. I'm begging you. It'll cause such trouble." "You really expect me to say and do nothing when your precious brother trusts me and Emily up like a pair of chickens and set fire to Mr. Hawke's workshop with us still inside it? You think we're going to forgive that? He tried to kill us, Lizzie, and if it hadn't been for Mr. Hawke's wonderful habit of losing his spectacles and coming back to look for 'em, we'd have been a pair of fried chickens." "I know, Nell, I know. But Mick's truly sorry, and he's changed." Nell laughed wryly. "If you think that, Lizzie Dugdale, then you're a fool." Nell paused and seemed to be thinking. Slowly, she said, "No, I won't tell Steve. Not for your Mick's sake, but for Steve's, though I reckon he'll get to hear anyway." Steve Henderson was the leader of the biggest gang that plagued the city and the man whom Nell loved. He was the father of her 6-year-old daughter Lucy. Yet Nell was strongly determined that her daughter would not grow up in the shadow of a man who operated on the wrong side of the law. Years before, though Steve had wanted to marry her, she'd given him an ultimatum. "You can see your child now and again. I'll not deny you or her that," Nell had said, "but you can't live with us, and I certainly won't marry you unless you go straight." But it seemed that Steve did not love her enough to give up his criminal life, and though he saw his daughter regularly, breaking Nell's heart afresh every time he did so, and paid generously towards the little girl's keep, he was unwilling to give up his activities. He and 1 or 2 other rival gangs held the good people of the city to ransom. In the aftermath of the Great War, the city, like so many others, suffered from poor housing with rows of back-to-back dwellings with crowded, insanitary courts behind them, sharing one outside toilet. Unemployment was on the rise, and even the brewers felt the drop in their sales. Families had no money to spend on beer. Yet, conversely, betting increased. Perhaps it was the thrill of the occasional win, or a desperate attempt to forget their hardships for a few hours. But the likes of Steve Henderson and Mick Dugdale, who led a rival gang, had prospered from illegal gambling. Pitch and toss, playing with 3 coins being thrown into the air and bets being taken on how they would fall, was one of the easiest forms to organise. Sky Edge, a patch of wasteland with a high vantage point, had become one of the most popular places.